Hey everybody, I'm Kelly Stone, CMO here at Channel Program, and it is a very special day here at Channel Program. I'm joined by Kevin Lancaster, our CEO, and today we are celebrating 1 year of broadcasting the Channel CEO podcast. Congrats, Kevin.
Thank you. Where does the time go? Time flies, huh?
And it only gets faster the older that we get. So crazy to think 1 year has already flown by.
Yes, it is. It's kind of in like reflecting on this and thinking about all the different conversations, all the different guests. I mean, it's been pretty wild. It's pretty, it's been great actually. It's been more than great because I've had some really, fantastic guests and some of the topics they covered. It's just been, I don't know, it's been almost like getting a masterclass or education in startup and entrepreneur and managing businesses at scale. So this is this has been a pretty wild ride.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that we have this opportunity to look back at all the things that you've gotten out of it. So let's start at the beginning. Why did you start a podcast?
All right. So there's a couple reasons. I'll try to keep it brief. One, like one of the earliest memories of my dad was that he would listen to the radio all day long in the background. And so I don't know, there's something about maybe like just, not that I want to be like some big broadcaster, but I think there's something to that. Like watching my dad listen to the radio all day long. Just kind of droning on the background. And then the second, as I was thinking about the second, is that I spent 17 years driving into DC, Washington, DC. And over that time, you got satellite radio, then you had, short form podcasts, long form podcasts. And those were absolutely how I, kept my sanity driving an hour and 15, 2 hours some days when there'd be an accident. So I think that was part of it. But then really where I think a lot of this came from, or kind of the spark for this, was what kind of, post COVID, maybe even like, pre-COVID, right? We had the opportunity. I was fortunate, right, to scale, a couple companies and one particular ID agent. I was blessed by having the ability to go out and meet these partners, go to so many events, build relationships, and I knew that they appreciated meeting the CEO and hearing the story and kind of, when I'd peel back on the journey and why we're going down this path, I could see that you were making connection with partners. And I figured, it's kind of this post-COVID world where, at the time events were starting to come back, but, there still wasn't, a strong event scene. Figured, this is a way to help, continue that engagement, right? Help some of these CEOs get their message out, get their origin story, their why, and build better relationships with the channel. And that's what this industry is all about. And so, I don't know, kind of think about it. I think those are kind of the three kind of, drivers and why I figured it'd be pretty cool to start a podcast.
And it was. So who was your first guest?
First official guest was Alton Johnson of Vanahai, believe it or not. So I stumbled across Vanahai maybe 2 years ago now, maybe just under 2 years ago, and loved what they were doing. They were kind of defining a category. I mean, this concept of penetration testing has been around for a while, but really no one had kind of brought that into the channel. There's kind of network assessments, vulnerability scans, and kind of some of those things. But when I first met Alton, I think they were getting ready to do their first presentation, their first pitch. Talking with them, I was like, gosh, it was like looking in the mirror. It was looking at me, unfortunately, 15, 20 years ago, something like that. But no, I just loved his passion, his enthusiasm. He was, younger CEO trying to really, conquer the world. And I think it was a no-brainer to have him on as the first guest. And, obviously we can't take any credit for their success, but I think they went on and got acquired, very, very shortly after they did their first pitch with us. So, that was a pretty cool first guest to have.
And it's clear what he got out of being on the podcast. What do you hope your listeners get out of subscribing?
It is kind of what I was saying, like early on. It's that, part of this, this industry, and that's why it's, it's really focused, the channel CEO. This industry is about relationships. And so, what I hope in each one of these episodes, and, I feel like I'm getting a little bit better at it, but I'm definitely not, I'm not a Joe Rogan, type, or, I'm not that good, but, no, I hope that we can build stronger relationships. I hope, from an MSP or the channel's perspective, I hope they understand or appreciate the struggle, right? The challenge. I mean, they probably, they can internalize it, and they understand it. If it's say a CEO or a business owner of an MSP listening, they certainly understand from an entrepreneurship standpoint the journey, the struggle, and what it takes to build not just like a great company, but to build a great technology, and then to attract a great channel and support a great channel. So I think what I'm motivated by is why I want to do this is again to kind of humanize and kind of build those relationships. At the end of the day, it's about the technology, and the technology has to work, but this industry is 100% built on relationships. And so if we can kind of peel back the curtain a little bit, and bring that element of relationship to the table, and make stronger connections between the channel and the CEOs or the executives that jump on, then I think that's a win-win, right? Because that just makes these partnerships that much stronger. So I think that's ultimately what I'm shooting for when I'm interviewing these individuals.
And certainly it goes to the heart of what Channel Program is doing too, is bringing together MSPs and vendors in a different place to understand the relationships and what those look like. And one of the key offerings here is Engage, of course, where vendors get a chance to pitch their products 7 minutes at a time anonymously to MSPs. I hope you can do it in less than 7 minutes, but what is your pitch of why people should subscribe to the Channel CEO?
So my pitch is, you get a peek, a window into the journey, right? You get a window into what it takes, in kind of take a step back. So the cool thing about what we've done with this podcast is that we're interviewing startups, like true startups, like Bonahai would be a perfect example. And then this week we interviewed Sonicwall, right? Bob, the CEO over at Sonicwall. I mean, they are been around for years, and so I think what's interesting about this is that the conversations, 1 week could be really about that entrepreneurial journey, and the struggle, and the why, and about that technology that week, and it's an emerging vendor, and then the next week it could be interviewing somebody like Bob, who had a really amazing career, and he's seen this industry from the vendor perspective from different areas. He's seen it as a CMO, a CRO. Didn't think he'd actually, I don't think, I think these are his words. I don't think he aspired or set out to be a CEO, but ended up the CEO of one of the most recognizable brands in this industry. And so I think when I'm interviewing, folks, I'm trying to draw some of that stuff out of there. It's not just about, the technology. And we ultimately get to the technology toward the end of it, but we kind of start with, like, what was the spark? Like, what got you into technology? And then what was that matriculation? What was that? Was it past? Some have gone to college, some have not. Some have really strong engineering backgrounds, which is interesting, kind of seeing some of the personality types. And then some are, MSPs that, they had a challenge they were trying to solve. They solved it. They showed a couple of their peers, and they said, you should turn that into a product. And then lo and behold, they go out and create a product. And you see that is a very consistent theme throughout the podcast, at least up to this point. So I think, if I was selling it, I think it's, the great thing is not every week's, it's not scripted in the sense their backgrounds and their whys and how they got there are all completely unique. They're all just, really fascinating. And so, I think it's a window into the struggle. It's a window into the journey, and it's a window into what it takes to be successful in this marketplace. And I think it's something that's relatable to both sides, of the market, whether it's a vendor or, IT service provider, MSP in the channel. So that would be my pitch. I don't know how good that was. And I know that was less than 7 minutes, but that's my pitch.
You got it in there. It's great. And, knowing that all of these stories are so different and you have spent dozens upon dozens of hours with these channel CEOs, what are some of the most unexpected lessons that you're taking away from a year of podcasting?
Man, unexpected lessons from podcasting. Well, I think one of the things that stands out, I think I just kind of mentioned it, is that there's no script, right? There's no script in the in how you get there. I think there's business, there are books, there are courses on, building a business, startup, all that stuff. But I think a lot of times you just throw that out the window, and I think you hear that in a lot of the episodes, right? It's a lot of it's just trial and error. A lot of it's passion. A lot of it's surrounding yourself with the right people. That's a very constant theme that I hear on the show is that you can have great technology. You can be ridiculously passionate about it, but if you don't have the right people to help you execute, up and down the stack, whether it's marketing or sales or operations or certainly with partner engagement or channel success, if you don't have the right team in place, then I think it becomes that much more challenging. So I think these are things that that are kind of like intuitive, but I don't know. I think one of my expectations coming into it is like, I'm going to hear the same story over and over, and it's going to be, hey, we started this and we got to this point, and then here we are. But I think the path is what's been most educational or most interesting about that. Everybody's journey is so unique, right? How they get there and their motivations, their why. Even like some we've gotten to like early childhood. What were they like when they were younger? Right? Were they, were they a tinkerer, or were they, were they even interested in technology? What was the spark? Like, who bought the first computer? Did you take apart the computer? Those kind of things. That's, some of those really interesting conversations. So it's like, I don't know, there's been some really, interesting, lessons learned out of it. But I think that the most, one that kind of keeps coming back, that there's not a formula. A lot of it's sheer willpower and brute force and surrounding yourself with the right people.
I think that the themes are always interesting because if it keeps coming up, clearly it's working for various members of the channel around regardless of what the vertical is too.
Yeah. It is.
So
it definitely is.
I know that you've got a million places to be and we are running out of time. So let's do a lightning round of the channel CEO superlatives. Are you ready?
Yes, let's do this. I was trying to think through some of this stuff, but yeah, let's do this.
All right. Most interesting guest to date.
Oh man. There's so many. Probably the most, well, not just because it is recent, and in fact, I interviewed him this week, Bob Van Kirk from Sonicwall. I think what was interesting, again, is that from his point of view, it was important for him to see. Actually, this is very common with a couple of the guests. Certainly, Emily Glass as well. That's another one. I mean, no, it's hard to say most interesting, but
it's like asking your favorite child, right?
it is, yeah. And then Adam Slutskin comes to mind, because of his I don't know, lifelong student architect of sales. But kind of going back to Bob, I think what was interesting about it is that he really pushed himself to see business or see a business from different seats, from that CRO point of view, from the CMO point of view, from the I think it was strategic accounts, and really wanted to be customer facing. And again, I think he said he didn't necessarily see himself as a CEO, but I think what was interesting is to hear how the combination of those different perspectives all led him down this path of being a CEO. And I think he's at a And I think he developed a really interesting appreciation for team building, and thinking about why the sales and marketing teams have to be in lockstep, and if they're not in lockstep, then that's a recipe for disaster. So I think that was pretty fascinating. But everybody's had some real fascinating backgrounds, and so if Bob, I think just the way he kind of approached it, and now obviously he's managing a business at massive scale, right? 1,600-ish employees. I think that was a pretty cool conversation to have.
Definitely. So next superlative is, what is the episode you wish you could record again?
Well, only because the podcast gods were not on our side. But when I interviewed Fred Vacola, apparently my video wasn't working, right? So I'm looking, at Fred and having a conversation, and we're seeing each other, and as it I try not to look at my phone or look at Teams or Slack while we're doing this. But apparently my video wasn't working, right? And I test 2-3 times before I jump on any of these episodes. And so that's the one that I would immediately redo, just because of the technical issue that we had. And again, that was another fascinating conversation, kind of somebody that's kind of grown up through startup, really interesting technology exposure as a young child, watching his father kind of being instrumental in early days of kind of that easy pass, and kind of gave him the spark of technology. Now he's managing obviously at massive scale. So that's one I wish I could redo, only just because from a technical standpoint, I botched it on my side. But outside of that, I think I wouldn't redo any of them. If I could, I'd have 2 or 3 hour conversations with each one of them, because they're just so much. Like, you start to get going and you kind of feel like a vibe, I guess, or a flow. But you can go in so many different directions. And I'm one that I love listening to the struggle, because there's at times there's not a more isolating job. At times it feels that way than being the CEO. You often feel like it's you against the world. So I love hearing the struggle, and I love hearing kind of overcoming the struggle. But that was a long answer to your question. Sorry.
Well, I think it's a universal experience too, of it's lonely at the top. And part of the allure of the channel CEO is that the guests that you have understand, as do you. So you're reaching a common ground that not everybody gets. So it is a fascinating look. All right, next superlative. Most listened to episode.
I gotta pull the stats on that. I was actually trying to do that here a little while ago, but I think this is maybe a week or two old, but I think it was Arvin from Super Ops. I think one, again, another fascinating backstory. Just amazing tech talent, from India, and extremely instrumental early days with Zoho, and has seen that grow, and there's exits. Another fascinating. But I think I have to go back and look. I should have pulled those stats, but I think I looked at last week. I think he was he was in the lead as far as most listened to. I have to go out and check out all those podcast platforms and see where we're cooking. But I think that's the one that it's the chart topper at this point.
It was a great conversation, $300 million exit, and he's got a lot to say. So it was a great listen.
He does. Yeah. And I'm most appreciative in that, I think we record around 11, sometimes 1 o'clock East. And I think we recorded, it was, 9 o'clock his time. So very appreciative that he stuck around and was able to record with us. So it was a cool one.
Definitely. So this is the $1 million question. What is your biggest takeaway from the last year?
I think biggest takeaway personally, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a takeaway. Yeah, this is a takeaway. It's about consistency, right? I think just when it comes to podcasting, maybe I'm thinking from a podcasting standpoint, because there've been some days where I'm like, just like getting out of bed, you want to do a podcast today, what have you. But then every time I start the conversation, it's like, holy crap, you learn so much. So I think one of the biggest takeaways is keeping an open mind, and leaning in and being consistent. That's just for me personally, like with this podcast, because I've gotten to have some just amazing conversations with folks across the industry. So that's kind of a personal maybe takeaway. And then I think a takeaway that really relates to the kind of the theme of the episodes or the podcasts is and it's hard to do this at times, but it's appreciate the journey. I think we often hear on the podcast, there's the struggle, and some of the guests have had earlier successes, and maybe it's their second or third organization they're a part of or CEO of. But I think one of the interesting takeaways is that or impressions is that appreciate the journey. Some days you're in the middle of the battle. All odds are stacked against you, and it seems like dire straits, and those are the times that I think that make successful CEOs, the ones that kind of plow through that and look back and appreciate that and learn from it. So I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is that you got to appreciate the journey. Sometimes it's hard to do that in the middle of it, and when things are looking doom and gloom and markets are screaming at you. But I think it's appreciate the journey, because I think it's one of those things when it's over, you look back and you do good, bad, or different. You savor all those times. And so, not to get too deep on our quick little episode here, but that's what I have to say about that.
Well, it's true. Nobody loves mile 22 of a marathon. Nobody's happy. Nobody.
Well, I will take your word for that, because that is on the bucket list. But I can imagine mile 22 sucks.
It hurts. It's awful, but you're almost at the end, and then you forget about all of those things and you're ready to do it again, regardless of how bad it was. So I think that there's a lot to be gleaned out of that for the journey, for sure. So
Amen.
That's the end of our questions today. Thanks for making the time to share all the lessons that you've gotten. Where can people listen to the podcast?
I think they can find it on Spotify. They can find it on Apple Podcasts. It's the channel CEO. They can go to my site, kevinlancaster.com. I think most of the episodes are up there. We have to catch back up on that. And then we broadcast live on LinkedIn and Facebook. And so if you're following, I know you get the notice that we're about to go live. And so I definitely suggest tuning in and listening, because there's nuggets in every one of these episodes. So definitely tune in.
Awesome. And if you or somebody that you think they should be on the podcast, certainly reach out to us. We would love to hear more and book up our calendars for the coming months, because while this is anniversary 1, we're confident that there'll be quite a few more. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I saw a lot of familiar faces in the comments section of this broadcast. And thanks for subscribing to the channel CEO. Until next time, thank you for tuning in. Bye, everybody.